All right, so we're going to be making a coil pot, and what we need is a, paper bowl, and we need a bread bag, which I'm going to put inside the paper bowl and turn inside out so that I can later use it to cover up my work in progress. So you put it in here, and then you kind of push the edges down so they're out of the way, and you have a nice smooth surface. You will also need some clay, and you will need some slip. This is slip, which is a mixture of clay plus water, and you will need a potter's needle or pin tool. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to make a pinch pot and put it inside the bowl. So the idea is that you take a piece of clay and you want it to be a perfectly round sphere. So if it looks like this, no, you want it to look like this. So let's get it perfectly round, and it should be roughly the size, a little bit smaller than your fist. So if I go like this, I can see that this is a little bigger than what I need. So I'm going to take some off. Okay, and then I'm going to make this into a perfectly round sphere. I can roll it in my hands on the table or just between my two hands, whatever makes us more comfortable. By the way, I have this cloth shopping bag taped to my table. You can have any sort of cloth that's not sticky taped to the table to make your job a little easier. That way you don't have to scrub the table when you're done. Okay, so now I have this nice sphere. It is a little bit smaller than my fist, so when I go like this, I see the edges of my fist all around, so that's how I know it is the correct size. Now, there actually is, if you're going to be later doing pottery wheel, no better preparation for learning the pottery wheel than doing a pinch pot. You stick your thumb inside, and your left hand or non-dominant hand becomes the wheel, and your right hand or dominant hand, if you're a lefty, obviously that would be reversed, becomes the hands that like you would use on the pottery wheel. So what I'm doing is I'm squeezing the clay, but I'm making sure that I'm squeezing it evenly all around by turning it with my non-dominant or my left hand while I am squeezing the clay. So you're squeezing it, however you're squeezing it, it's got to be done symmetrically all around, okay? The other thing is, because you're going to be adding to this, you want to leave the rim fairly thick. So don't squeeze all the way up to here and make a little thin rim. You need a fairly thick rim. So now that it's wide enough, I can get my second thumb in there, and I'm just going to turn it, and my thumbs go inside and the other parts of my hand become kind of the wheel, and turn it. And you make sure the whole thing is as even as possible, okay? So when you are done, you can see it's a lot bigger than it was. I'm now going to take the rim, and I'm going to even it out by putting the whole thing upside down and just gently dropping it a few times so I have a very even flat rim, because I'm going to be building up the rest of my pot onto this. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it in here. The bag is very important, because what you don't want is for the clay to stick to the inside of the bowl. So you're going to put it in here, and you need to press it so that the bottom is flat. This is very important, because if you don't compress the bottom, as you build up your pinch pot, it's going to start rolling all over the place. So compressing the bottom nice and even all the way around is really important. Now, this paper bowl almost becomes a de facto pottery wheel, in that you can turn it as you're working, and you can work on all sides. Now, I printed out a worksheet that has different types of coils, and I'm going to use that worksheet. It's not my own original worksheet. I actually got it off of Pinterest. Would love to give credit to the art teacher who created it. It is wonderful. But you can see the different types of coils, and we're going to be making some coils right now. Now, as you see, I've pre-made some coils and they're fairly even. I did a decent job on them. What you'll notice is that they are just about the fatness of my pinky, roughly the fatness of my pinky. So that's how fat you want to make the coils. I'm just going to push them a little bit out of the way because I want you to be able to see how to make a coil. So the first thing you're going to do is just take a piece of clay and you're going to squeeze it back and forth in your hand. Now, for coil building, you do need clay that is fairly soft and plastic. So we've been recently doing slab building where you want the clay a little bit stiffer. You don't want the clay to be sticky, but you do not want it to be too dry, okay? So the way you kind of mush stuff up and redo it, mush stuff up and redo it, if you do that too much, you're going to have to add water to the clay and knead that water into the clay because coil making does not work if the clay is too dry. So once you have a fairly long piece of clay, you're going to just roll it in your two hands until it's even. You don't want it thicker on one side and thinner on the other. You want it to just be even all the way, okay? And then you need two hands to roll it. It's going to get longer, it's going to get thinner, and you want it to be even the whole way down. You do not want it to be thicker on one side and thinner on the other. So two hands, you roll it back and forth, and it's super important that you don't press too hard. You just roll it, but not press. Here's one where I pressed a little too hard, and you can see there's sort of an indentation in it. That's not what you want. Okay, so this is still too thick. I'm just going to keep moving my two hands along it until it is even and about the width of my pinky. Now, you don't need an exceptionally long coil. It just has to fit around the rim of this pot. So let's see how long a coil I actually need. I actually only need that length if I'm making straight coils. So knowing that I only need that length, and I've got all this clay, and I know that it needs to be just half the size of this, I'm going to cut this in half. And now I can make extra coils. So let's use that to measure. And now I can just roll it until it is this length. Now, if you see it start getting thinner in one spot and thicker in another, move away from the thinnest spot so that it doesn't get pinched. The idea is that it's going to be even all the way down. And it matters. It actually does matter. You don't want your artwork to fall apart because you did it wrong. And you also don't want it to look ugly. You want it to look nice. So it's super important that you make your coils even so that your pottery looks nice. Remember, art is about what it looks like, just like food is about what it tastes like. If you cook food incorrectly, it could taste terrible. If you create art and you don't follow any sort of directions, you could end up with something you're not very proud of. So let's learn how to do this technique correctly before we deviate from the instructions and go off and do our own thing. Let's learn the traditional way first. Okay, so I've got my coils. You now know how to make a nice even coil so it looks nice. And now let's look at the different types of coil designs. First, let's do the straight coils, and I'll show you how to do that, and then I'll show you how to do the spirals and some of the others. So first off, let me take my pot, and for my first coil, and this is not necessary for every coil, just for the first one, and then later it's going to be necessary every time you start a new session. So I'm going to slip and score just like we've been doing, and after that first layer, we're just going to be blending it. But the next day when we come back, we're going to slip and score again, okay, because the clay will be a little too hard. So when you slip and score, you must always go in two different directions. So you go in this direction I noticed I put the slip on first and then in this direction. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my coil. Okay, I'm going to put the slip on first. And then you don't want to dig so deep that you destroy the coil, but you have to dig into it enough that the two parts mush together like Velcro, okay? So it's super important that this coil go onto the pot facing down so that the hashtags that I scratched here and the hashtags that I scratched there lock into each other, okay? Now, I'm just going to cut off the extra. That's fine. And now, this is very important. I need to blend it, but I'm going to blend it from the inside. The reason why I'm blending it from the inside is that the coils are decorative. We want them to stay on the outside. So I'm going to just go into the inside. Again, you can hold it in your hand. And I'm going to blend up into the next coil. So I'm supporting it with one hand. I'm also supporting it with my fingers. And I'm just going around and blending it. Little by little, little by little, little by little. Okay, until the line is obliterated. Now, the next layer of coil that I do, I have to blend, yes, but I do not have to slip and score until the next day when I come back. I'm going to use a tool if I can find it. They've got these little rubber tips, and they're great for defining shapes. So I'm just going to dip mine in the water. I'll dip it in the slip. And I'm going to just go in here, and I'm going to redefine this shape so that it has a nice pattern to it. Okay, I'm just going to go around. Now, if you remember from when you took Foundations of Art, the teachers used to make these Zentangles, which are these really fun line patterns. So hearkening back to that, you're going to be making a line pattern, but using coils of clay. Okay. So there's my first coil of my pot. I'm going to put it down, and then I'm going to make my next coil. So again, I'm going to measure it first. If I have extra, I'm going to cut it off, but I'm not going to mush it up because I could use it for a different type of coil. Okay, now at this point, remember, for today, we do not need to slip and score. After today, we will, because the clay will be drier when we come back to it, even after being wrapped in plastic. But for the rest of this session, we do not need to slip and score, but we do need to blend, and we're going to be blending on the inside. If you do not blend, this will pop off because the only thing holding it together is the water inside the clay. So the one thing that you might want to notice is that I'm not touching the top of the rim. The top of the rim needs to be nice and thick because it's got to accept the next coil. So I'm actually going around and I'm obliterating the line between the top coil and the next coil down. There should be no lines visible on the inside of your pot, just the outside. The lines on the outside are decorative. The lines on the inside would mean that your pot had no shot at survival because you didn't blend the clay. Okay, with this clay, because it's nice and soft, you can blend it and you don't need to slip and score. Now, right here, I don't know if you can see there. Let me just show you. It looks a little sloppy, so remember, art is about what it looks like. If it does not look good, it is not good. So we need to make it look good. And we'll just smooth that out. I just put a little bit of slip on my finger. Now, resist the urge to slime up your entire pot. A lot of people will just dip their fingers in slip and they'll just put slip over the entire pot. If you do that, you have messed up, okay? The reason why you've officially messed up if you did that is because now your pot is so wet and so weak that it will collapse from the weight of because it's just saturated with water from the additional coils. So do not mess up by just sliming up your entire pot. Okay, this is our pot, and this is what it looks from the side, and you can see it looks very nice and decorative. Now let's look at the next type of coils, and you'll see that there's these spirals. So let's make a few spirals. I'm not sure how many spirals I need, but I'll start out by making a few. Okay, so let's see. There's my first spiral. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a double spiral. So I'm going to go here and wind it tight because you don't want a hole in the middle. And then I'm going to wind it up to here, okay? And I'm going to just tighten it so that they are the same height. It looks like this one's a little bigger and this one's a little smaller. So I'm going to have to make this one smaller so that it's the identical size. So I'm just going to go here, go like that, and take off the extra clay. And then I will tighten this up, and I'm going to make a bunch of these little spirals. So the question is, how many spirals do I have to make to go around the pot? Let's see. 1, 2, let's see. 3, 4. I would say probably 5 would be enough, okay? So you see how I sort of figured that out by estimating. And I also want to know how long a piece of clay I need to make these spirals. So let's just go like this. And I would say just slightly longer than this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bunch of spirals I'm going to make a bunch of coils that are all the same size. Then I'm going to turn them into spirals. And then I'm going to make sure the spirals are all the same size. That way, and I know now that I need 5. Okay, so 3. And don't mush up your extra clay because you can use it for other types of coils. Okay, so now I have 5. And I have an extra one just in case. And now I'm going to make them into tight little spirals. And again, because it's still today, I do not need to slip and score. I will if I come back tomorrow. Okay, I've got 5 of them. I'm going to put them on my pot and then I'm going to blend them. So let's see. Let me put them with the open part down. That's 1. This is 2. This is 3. This is 4. Here's 5. Okay. One of the things that I'm noticing is that there's this little gap in the design because the spirals are round. So I need to put little round balls of clay in there. And luckily I have these and I didn't mush it up. If I had mushed it up, I probably would have turned it from good wet clay to bad dry clay. and then I would have had to have added water and remixed it. So let's just make a bunch of these, and let's make sure that they are all the even size. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all the correct size. They're all even. They're nice and round. They look pretty. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push them in from the inside. Okay, that'll give me some extra clay on the inside. And I think it looks quite pretty that way. So, and then we're going to have to do some very serious blending. Otherwise, again, this design, as pretty as it is, will have no shot at survival. It will, not that it might fall apart, it will definitely fall apart if we do not blend it, because the only thing holding it together is the water inside the clay. So logically, when the clay dries and there is no more water, then there is nothing holding it together. So if you see any sort of design on the inside, it is not blended yet. So we have to do this right now. Get in here, and you have to use your fingers. You can use a little bit of slip, but I'm going to caution you, not so much that you weaken the pot. Using the correct amount of water is very, very important. And most people, when they're inexperienced with clay, they tend to use too much water and it falls apart, or they use too little water and it cracks. So also notice that I'm protecting it by cupping my hand around the outside. Okay, if you do not support the outside, it will fall apart. So you see how I'm just very carefully and gently blending it, turning it, blending it. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to another. And if there's any lines on the inside at all, any sort of decoration at all on the inside visible, then you are not done. I have seen this done where the teacher makes her students slip and score every single thing that they add on. But just from personal experience, I can tell you that is not necessary. Unless you're coming back to a project you have saved from the previous day. Okay, now when we have reached this point, we're going to take a look at the pot, and I want to go over with you the different parts of a pot. Okay, if you look at this worksheet, what the art teacher who created this worksheet created is a cylinder, but we're going to not be doing that. We're going to be creating a little vase. So I'm going to just show you real quick the different parts. This is the foot, okay? This is the body, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a shoulder, okay? So you can tell that the different parts of a pot correspond with a person's body. So this is the shoulder of the pot, okay? So it's like a person's shoulder, it goes in, right? So do you see how I'm angling it in a little? And now I need to straighten out the rim by adding another straight coil and a few more of these little round balls. So I'm going to do that right now. This will probably be your stopping point after the first day. So presuming that you came back the second day, you would need to slip and score that next coil. So I'm going to just pretend that it's the second day, and I'm going to slip and score the next coil. So you always start out with the slip. Okay, and then you're going to take your next coil, which has to be really super even, and you have to scratch in 2 different directions. So don't scratch so deep that the whole thing falls apart. Okay, you don't want to do that. So you get little sort of hash marks on here. And then remember that you're going to have to lock it in to the pot that you started the day before. So you're going to need little hash marks on that as well. Okay, and now because I already put the slip on one side, what I did was I picked the drier side. So in other words, because this had been sitting out overnight, it's drier. So the side that's drier is the side that you saturate the edge, just the rim, with slip. And the new fresh clay, you probably don't need to add slip to, but you do need to make sure that the little hatch marks are facing the same way so that they lock into each other. So I'm going to just go around here, making sure the hash marks are facing the same way, locking in, and then I'm going to go inside and blend it, okay? If you see the line where one thing ends and the other begins, on the outside, that's decorative, and on the inside, it means that you are not done and that your work will not survive because you forgot to blend it, okay? So make sure that you remember to blend on the inside, leaving the outside as decorative. Now, you see here, it looks a little sloppy, so this is where this tool comes in very, very handy. You can just dip it in the slip, and you can kind of reshape your pot. Another thing that actually works extremely well for this, believe it or not, is a paintbrush. If you take a short, stiff paintbrush, like this has very stiff bristles, you dip it in the slip, you can actually shape the pottery and really get a very nice fine finish on it. This is a trick actually that my daughter taught me. My daughter is also a ceramicist, and she has a BFA in ceramics, and she taught me this trick, which she actually nobody actually taught her. It's something that she figured out on her own, but it works beautifully to really reshape a clay sculpture and get rid of any unattractive marks. So I'm just going to go around and do this symmetrically. Okay, so this is my pot so far, and now I want to look at what else I can do here. I'm probably not going to use all the different types of coils, but I do like the idea of the next part of my pot having squiggles on it. So, again, this is the foot, the body, the shoulder. The next thing is the neck, and I like the idea of the neck having squiggles. So, again, I'm going to take a piece of clay, and actually I'm going to take this coil and I'm going to make it a little thinner. Because I am creating a pot that's got a little bit more, weight on the bottom, and it can be a little thinner. The coils can be a little thinner as we go up because they don't hold the weight of the rest of the pot above it. So I can take this and I can just make these nice even squiggles. So I'm going to just go up and down. And I'm going to make it a little longer than it needs to be, and then I'll cut off the extra. Now, for the squiggles, you have to use fairly soft clay because it's going to be doing a lot of bending. If you find that you're getting cracks, then you need to re-wet your clay with a little slip and mush it around in your hands until it is plastic again. So what do I mean by plastic? Well, if the clay is sticky, it's too wet, and if it cracks along the edges of your coils, then it's too dry. So plastic clay is just right. Now, what I'm going to do before I add this onto my pot is I'm going to do all the blending beforehand. So I'm going to just slide some slip along here. Okay, and then I'm going to use my thumb and I'm going to blend the clay together before I put it on. Okay, and now let me just blend it nicely. And you can see that it's really not fully blended because it does come apart. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and that's how it looks on this side. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip and score this one as well. Okay, just to be on the safe side. If you ever have any doubt about whether something is going to stay together, slipping and scoring will make it super extra strong beyond what merely blending it would do. When I was teaching at a summer camp, we had a student who made this beautiful ceramic house, made this beautiful house out of clay, and he worked really hard, and he scratched and slipped the walls together, and he was carrying it to the shelf, and he accidentally dropped it. The whole thing broke into pieces, except the corners of the walls where he had slipped and scored did not fall apart. That was the one thing that stayed together. It was actually the strongest part of the whole thing. So now I'm going to put this on, and it's going to become the neck of my pot. Right? And let me just get in there with my thumb. I got to get my thumb wet, and I'm going to do some massive amounts of blending in here. And then I will show you how the whole thing looks. Okay. I'm going to take the back end of my potter's needle, and I'm actually going to hold the outside, and I'm going to do some blending with the back end of my potter's needle because I can't get my fingers in there to do any sort of precise blending. So I'm going to use this dipped in slip. Again, not so much slip that the whole thing falls apart. You have to be very careful. And notice how I'm holding it from the outside so there's something supporting it as I blend the inside. Otherwise, it will fall apart. Okay. Now, let's look at my design. And you can see foot, body, shoulder, and now neck. And now I'm going to use my paintbrush to neaten this up. And you can see you're starting to get quite an attractive, interesting design. Part of what makes the design interesting and good is that it is symmetrical. Whatever I do on this side goes all the way around. It has a handmade look to it. It does not look like a machine made it. And that actually adds to the charm of coil pottery. So now, if you look, there's a little angle to the back end of the paintbrush, not toothbrush, that is very useful for putting the designs back in. So going around and neatening up your design, sometimes it works better if you wait till the next day when the clay is leather hard and it's not quite soft enough to change the overall shape, but it is soft enough that you can refine the shapes. Okay. And if your artwork falls apart, the most important thing is to know why it fell apart so you can do it again and this time get it right. But this is the basics for how to continue making the pot. I don't think I need to go on too much further. I would probably add a few more straight coils to this. Again, you do not need to use every single type of coil in your coil pot. It's just good to know what your options are and to come up with an attractive and decorative pinch pot design. When you are ready to stop, but you're not quite done yet, like as in, you know you're going to be adding to it the next day, you put it back in the paper bowl with the bag, and then you lift the bag up, and you don't pull it too tight because you don't want to mush up your design. You just gently drape it around, and that way it'll stay somewhat wet over the next day without becoming, you don't want it to stay completely wet. You want it to dry a little. You want it to set up a little so it's strong enough that you can add more coils the next day. And the next day, all you need to do is pull this down, look at your design without sliming up the whole thing. Remember, you don't want to turn it into bad, soft, gooey clay. You don't want to turn your entire pot into slip. You can neaten it up, and then you can, when you feel that your design is nice and neat and even, you can continue working. Okay, and when you're totally done, the last thing you're going to do when you feel your pot is completely finished and it has a foot, a body, a shoulder, and a neck. This one's not done because it doesn't really have its neck yet. But when you feel you are completely done, your next step is to go onto the bottom and write your full name. Please do not write initials. Please write your entire full name using the potter's needle. Okay? And then you would allow it to dry. And at that point, you would not be wrapping it again. You would be allowing it to dry so that we can bisque fire it. Here's the finished pot. I'm going to allow it to dry now. And I can actually finish telling you the parts of a pot now. That's the foot. This is the body where it goes in. It's the shoulder. This is the neck. And this top part, which I added after I turned the video camera off, is the lip of the pot. So lip, neck, shoulder, body, and foot. And when we learn the pottery wheel, we'll use all those same parts in order to shape a vase on the pottery wheel.